Hello, everybody. My name is Barry Johnson. I'd like to welcome you back to another edition of Studio Talk. I'm not sure if you've heard already, but Sweetwater apparently is going to take on Reverb as a used gear market. Sweetwater's had used gear on their site for some time, but it's really been more like Craigslist, where you kind of work it out with the buyer and all they are is just a classified ads. They're not involved in that model at all. Well, if you know this, a major portion of Sweetwater was bought out or invested in by a capital management company. And obviously to be able to do what they're doing against Reverb takes a lot of capital, probably more than Sweetwater was willing to take on their own, because there's a lot of potential liability there. Well, if you've been doing this some time, you know that eBay for the longest time was the king of kings when it came to buying and selling gear, at least on a nationwide or a global perspective. We've always had Craigslist, which was really popular for a long time in your local market. However, I just simply won't deal with Craigslist anymore. The problem with Craigslist is you don't know if you're getting scammed half the time or not. There's as many scammers on there trying to rip you off as there are people trying to actually do good business and sell and buy good products, okay? So I don't use Craigslist anymore. Maybe you do, and that's a personal choice, but for me, it's out the window, okay? So for eBay, as an example, a lot of us, actually most of us, moved away from eBay when they started tagging on 10% or higher of every sale that you did. So if you sold something for $3,000, you were paying eBay $300. I'm sorry, that was just pushing the limit too far. That's what spawned the evolution of Reverb today as we've known it. Pretty much Reverb today owns the majority of the market for independent buyers and sellers of music gear, okay? They pretty much dominate the market at this point. There's some other ways to do it. You can still find things on eBay, but just go do a search on eBay and you're not gonna find as much as you thought. And for the most part, it's all dealers, not your average person selling, because the dealers get a discount off the percentage that they pay, whereas we didn't. They gouged us to death, okay? So eBay is no longer an option for any of us. At least in my opinion. It's just simply not worth it. Now, the thing that Reverb has going for it, now I'm a big fan of Reverb. Now, I've read a lot of comments with people complaining about their interactions with Reverb, but I've been buying and selling on Reverb since it first started, and I've not had one single issue, not one. I take that back. I did have one issue, but Reverb solved it. They took care of it. They dealt with it. And I came to a conclusion that I was happy with, as did the seller when I was buying something, okay? So the reality is overwhelming majority, I've had zero issues whatsoever. You obviously look at the amount of money that is to be made there off getting a piece of all used instruments that happen really globally, quite frankly. There's got to be a great opportunity, which is why I think Sweetwater's jumping in the game for this at this particular stage. Obviously, with this capital management company coming in, they now have the resources, because you kind of have to be a quasi-bank, because you have to guarantee those purchases, or at least Reverb guarantees the purchase, and I have to imagine that that's the same case for Sweetwater. But if you notice, Sweetwater has a ton of ads on it now, way more than they ever had before in just their classifieds. Now, what's interesting, I've also been reading in some of the forums that you'll find the same item listed on Reverb now you'll find over at Sweetwater, which that begs the question, what happens if one sells before the other too soon? Are people going a little bit too far with that and rolling the dice on their reputation? That's a question to be pondered by you if you happen to be one of those people. But outside of that, what we're noticing is the prices are different from Reverb. They are Sweetwater. They're actually giving a discount. They're actually cheaper on Sweetwater selling than they are on Reverb. Now, I have to imagine that probably Sweetwater reached out to a lot of the major dealers across the country and said, hey, look, we'll give you an entry-level deal, sell your stuff here. Well, you're not going to have to pay that same percentage that other folks coming in here, the independent seller, does. So now when you look at it like that, I think you have to ask yourself, well, everybody says competition is good. Competition breeds innovation. Competition fuels pricing challenges and things like that. So usually there's greater opportunity when there's greater competition. I don't have a problem with that. And I think on the general surface, I think a company like Sweetwater can probably do a really good job at this. Okay, so now let's get into some of the specifics while I dig out my phone and kind of start reading some of this stuff to you off the top of my head so you can get up to speed on the generalities of what's going on. So Sweetwater, before I get started on some of this, I have to ask this question. What were you thinking? I mean, really, what were you thinking? The information and the details on this are so ridiculously vague that it's excruciating, okay? You've really got to go hunt to find the details of this. I never had that problem with eBay, never had that problem with Reverb, had that problem like crazy looking into the specifics of yours. You find topics and locations where you would have never expect to find them, okay? So that's one thing. I think you guys probably did not spend even 5 minutes thinking about or anticipating all of the various questions that people like myself and others are going to have. And that makes it very difficult and very frustrating because this is something where you want to be totally upfront, totally open about this, and lay this out there in a plain, easy to understand way. Now, I don't think you did this trying to fool anyone. I just think you guys did really not think this through very well at all. All right, so now I've got my phone, and I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of all the gear merchandise and everything that you see for sale by people, and you see down below is a part that says, how does it work? And then underneath that, Help Center. Well, you would think the details and specifics, every question that you're going to have about this new plan as it relates to Reverb, so you can do a cost analysis and whether it makes sense for you to go this route or not, you need to understand these things. You would kind of think logically that every question you would have there would be answered under the how does it work, because we're asking how does it work. But no, you're not going to find the answers to most of these questions in that area. It's very generic, very vague. Again, what were you freaking thinking, okay? Well, you got to go down to the Help Center if you actually want to find the answers to the questions about how it works. So again, why do you have a how it works option? It doesn't make any sense to me, okay? You guys are normally really good at this, but in my opinion, you guys have not done a very good job on this, okay? So up front, the fees are 7%, okay? So I'm going to lay that out for you. The fees to sell something roll up to 7%. They're a combination of two different fees, but that didn't really matter. Out the door, they're 7%. Those are the seller fees. A big question that I have that I cannot seem to find answered there, and it's probably hidden there, some, snake in the grass or something, I don't know. But apparently it seems like PayPal is doing the credit card processing or the payment processing for these sales, which I find very interesting. Sweetwater's already set up with existing infrastructure to be able to run cards and stuff. Why did they need to go through PayPal? That's a question I have, and it's not a concern, but it is a question. It's kind of curious if you think about it. Now, what's not clear is what are PayPal's fees associated with this? Because on Reverb and eBay, you have seller fees, and then you have payment processing fees, and they're typically different from each other. Now, if the payment fees are included in the 7%, you did not make that clear at all, because I searched through every topic and could not find that answer anywhere. It just says they're going to be processed through PayPal, which is fine. At this point in the world, everybody should probably be familiar with PayPal and how to use that at this point, okay? But I found that to be quite frustrating. Now, an interesting perk, and I'll be honest with you, I like what they did here. I think it's very interesting, is that as you got money coming, let's say, for example, you sell something for $1,000 on there, right? Well, they're going to charge you 7%. So you're going to pay $70 in this particular example of seller fees, okay? $70 for $1,000. That's not too terrible, right? So you're going to pay 7%. Now, once you're ready to get those funds, you have two different ways of achieving or getting access to those funds. One, through PayPal, and in PayPal, you actually have multiple options there too, but PayPal's one source. The other one is, let's say, for example, like I said, you sold something for $1,000. It would have been $70 in fees. You can basically take that $70 and apply it towards the equivalent, I forget what they call it, but the equivalent of a Sweetwater gift card that can be used to purchase things. Meaning, basically, if you're going to turn around and buy something for Sweetwater, you're not paying any seller fees. It's kind of the incentive to say, okay, you made that money. Now spend that money with us. Now, if you're selling a piece of gear to fund a new piece of gear, then this is really, really good, especially if you're selling higher ticket items, like things in the thousands of dollars. That's where these things will start to add up. I think that's actually a really, really, really cool feature. In effect, what they're basically doing is giving you 7% off whatever you're buying. Now, truth be told, if you're smart about it and you get on the phone and you call them and you talk to them, you can pretty much negotiate 7% off every day of the week for the most part. I get stuff off all the time. I rarely pay the asking price that they have on Sweetwater. Rarely, unless it's an accessory or something small. But if I'm buying something, hey, I'm going to give my Sweetwater sales representative a call and say, hey, can we kind of negotiate this down a little bit? And usually I've not had a problem with that, okay? So that's something to consider. All right, well, just like anything else, the government's going to want their piece of the pie. So apparently if you sell anything, I think it's over $5.99 or something like that, you have to fill out federal tax information for the IRS. How that gets used in the end and the effect that that has on your ultimate income tax return or whatever, I don't know. I guess time will tell because this is all new stuff to me. Okay, I don't recall having to do that. I probably set it up with Reverb, but apparently you do the same thing with Reverb so that they've got that. So I don't think that's a selling. That's the income that's coming in, and technically I guess that's taxable in some way. If it is, that's kind of a rip-off federal government. But Sweetwater, you don't have anything to do about this. For those of you that may not particularly like this, get over it, guys and girls. This is just the law in the United States, okay? Sweetwater couldn't get out of this if they wanted to. They're required by the federal government and by the IRS to provide these forms and get this information. So if you all hung up about that, get off your hung up pretty quickly, or just don't use any of these services because you're going to run into that more and more and more. On top of that, as throughout the nation, there's only a handful of states left here in the United States that do not have taxes required, sales tax required on internet sales. The majority of the states in the country have gone to that where you're now paying tax on it. So now there's more and more and more of an incentive to buy locally and support your local music store. Hopefully you're doing that if you have them available and readily available and they have the product you're looking for. I strongly recommend doing that. But on top of that, if you are going to buy used in the local market, then you can avoid the whole tax situation and IRS and everything else. Unofficially, I guess I'm giving that advice because I'm not an attorney, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so you got to consider these things and take these things into consideration when you're doing that. But you'd have to do that on Reverb too. Got it? Yeah. Now, this one's interesting. A question came up under the Help Center, not under their Everything You Need to Know fact, which this falls under that. But anyway, a question came up is what happens if I've got an item listed on Sweetwater and I sell it locally? Now, let's be honest. Most of us out there, if we sold it locally, we would just cancel the thing, not pay any fees whatsoever, and deal with that locally. That's what most of us would do. So we avoid those fees, okay? But the reality is you have the option if you choose to. And where this is going to come into play is if you want to be secure about the payment you're receiving, especially if it's not via cash, that you're not going to get ripped off or scammed by somebody, and some protection. So you can still sell locally, okay? But you can do it through Sweetwater where the buyer has to pick up and they both have to log in and indicate that the transaction actually was completed. So I don't think many of you are going to choose that. I think most people are just going to cancel the sale, bada bing, sell it locally and be done with it, make up whatever excuse you have to. It's what I do, quite frankly, okay? But at the end of the day, you have that option available to you. Okay, so here's where I've got a lot of questions, and I think probably only time is going to air this one out, okay? And that's what happens if you sell an item and the buyer now wants to return it and get a refund, okay? I don't know about you, but I'm selling something online. I don't have any tolerance or patience for buyer's remorse. If for some reason my product did not meet my description, it did not meet the condition and all of those things, then fine, I understand that. However, we're not a store, okay? Once we make a sale, we should be able to complete it. Now, the question comes out is what happens if they ask for a refund? This is where things are a little vague, okay? It's a little sketchy. It's not very clear. It should be very definitive and very well laid out with examples given, okay? Because this is a big question, all right? One of the things I liked about being a buyer and a seller on Reverb is they do stand up for for you and fight for you, okay? I've had them do that once in the past for me. I think I talked about that earlier. But the reality is they're reasonable and they can be discussed. Sweetwater may end up being that way, but just like Reverb errs on the side of the buyer over the seller, okay, I have no doubt that Sweetwater will do the same thing. So basically, it basically says if within the time frame they want to return it, then they can return it. Now, there's still some other vague stuff around that. So if that's the case, I think Sweetwater, you need to clarify that and really go on record fully describing exactly how that works. Because if any buyer can just turn around and want a refund out of the blue because they've got buyer's remorse, I'm sorry, this dog don't want to hunt there. I don't want any part of that. Okay, so lastly, it talks about paying shipping costs and doing figuring out the cost of shipping your unit. Now, they do offer a shipping calculator. I don't find that to be very helpful. There's online tools for that. You don't need Sweetwater to tell you that. But I couldn't find anything on there where they've actually negotiated discounted pricing for the cost of shipping with either UPS or FedEx. I don't see that on there. You do get that with Reverb, okay? I've actually bought a couple of labels before in the past and saved quite a bit of money by going through them. I did test that because I'd asked I have some friends that work at a UPS store, so I asked them to pull it up and give me a quote, and it actually was cheaper, okay? So there is that advantage. So Sweetwater, you may want to consider that. All right, so there it is. That's basically a brief summary and an overview. My general perception of this overall is I think this is a good thing for all of us. I think competition breeds a lot of great things for consumers at the end of the day. I think that's wonderful. I think I'm very disappointed in Sweetwater and the poor communication and not really having all of this really laid out in a simplistic way and really, quite frankly, anticipating all the questions that users may have. What they're going to have to be doing is constantly answering these questions and the same questions over and over and over until you do this. So Sweetwater, I strongly recommend that you do that. So if you like the things I talk about on this channel, do me a favor, hit that like button, that subscribe button, and notification bell. So when you know I got a new video out, you can come check me out and everything. It helps me grow the channel. I hit a 1-year anniversary of this channel last month, okay, and I'm pushing 14,000 subscribers so far. So by YouTube standards, this thing's growing pretty quick, okay? But here's one thing I need you to know about this channel if it's the first time you're watching, if you've made it this far in the video. You're always going to get straight talk from me. I'm never going to peddle gear. I'm never going to be bought out by any gear manufacturer. I'm never going to be bought out or influenced by any gear distributor. At the end of the day, I'm going to tell you a real deal. I've got a real job. I make a decent living doing what I'm doing. I don't need to make a penny off this YouTube channel, although I do want to make some money doing because I can fund my studio with this money, okay? And it's not like I'm freaking getting rich. Most of these YouTubers out there are just glorified advertisement salespeople. That's not me. So if you're looking for that, maybe you found the right place in watching my channel. If you like being sold to all the time, then enjoy it. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm just saying it's an observation. Just telling you like it is. So until next time, I hope every one of you have a great day. Bye-bye.